So every time we do a video like this, we lose people. This is one of those videos where it's going to be painful for some people. Some people already know the sort of situation, what's going on, and being a bit prepared for it. Others will be wanting to prepare for it, and some people will be just completely shocked and just think I'm a nutcase. If you sit children down to do a dot to dot, they will come up with two different pictures, and it's the same for people when they try to decipher what's going on. It's very confusing, and we've been conditioned for a very long time. The media have managed to not actually put the truth out. Not so much lie in the beginning, it was more that they just wouldn't discuss certain things. Most people can see there's a general bias amongst the mainstream media. So I'm just pointing out the dots really, the things that we see, and you can join them up how you want. So we've seen the protests in Europe, and we're probably going to see some protests here. We know that farmers are struggling. The climate thing, the rewilding things that they're talking about in Wales, about giving up 10% of their land to wildflowers and forests, and we already don't grow enough food here. So, you know, all these things that are going to put us a little bit of struggle on. And in Europe we've seen them protesting a lot about this subject. You know, the climate conditions are setting, they don't want you to eat meat and all these different things. And there's also a law being passed that's going to rewild poorer land and make it better. But it's very unclear when you read the literature on it of what they mean by poor land. Some of it talks about nature areas, and I'm all for it. I'm actually all for rewilding certain areas, but not at the expense of people starving to death, or that prices go up so much they can't afford to eat, and that sort of struggle. I think things can be done to teach people how to farm in a better way. So farmers are going to be struggling because their subsidies are going to be getting cut or taken away, and they're not sure what they're going to do. And you hear this a lot on things. They're talking about diversifying, trying to do wedding venues and all sorts of different things that, you know, a wedding venue doesn't really feed the population, does it? You just think this isn't right when we don't actually grow enough food, and we're importing food. Food is travelling miles and miles and miles, and if we really care about the environment, planes should get a look at, and also the amount of travelling that our food does around the world to feed us. We should definitely be looking to be more self-sufficient, and this just isn't the case when it comes to farming. And this thing where they're losing their subsidies, we're going to see farmers go under, unfortunately. And I know people won't like to hear this, our food has been too cheap. And I know when I go into the shop I go, how on earth is it too cheap? Because it's so bloody expensive. Yet those costs that the farmer has to take on, all the feed, you know, the fertiliser, the machinery, hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of machinery, it's immense. And this is why they get subsidies, because food is so expensive. And if you do away with that, farmers will go under. And I'm not for subsidies actually, because I think it puts too much control in the hands of the government, because they can take them away, as we're going to be seeing. We should be paying a fair price. So if there's any doubt who's making the money, it's the supermarkets and their CEOs. You know, £4 million salary and bonuses. You know, when everyone else is feeling the squeeze of food prices, I think that's a bit too much. And what gets me is, where I connect the dots to this is, why is it happening everywhere? You know, there's one thing happening in this country, but this sort of thing, this squeeze is happening across Europe, and the governments aren't doing anything about it. So the Netherlands put a stop to it, because they actually put a party in power. The people rose up and stuck with the farmers and stopped it. So it can be stopped, and it will really upset these buggers, and I really want to see them upset. They're all following suit, and even around the world they're all going to be trying to follow this same system of less land to grow on. It is a really difficult subject when you talk about farming, because in order to feed the world, they say you've got to use lots of chemicals, you've got to have the massive tractors, and you've got to farm hugely and on a large scale, and you've got to have as much as that crop survive as possible. You can't allow any of it to die, because you'll lose productivity, and it'll be a waste of chemical, and it'll be a waste of this, that and the other. I do believe there's got to be a better way, and there's a transition, not a case of we just won't farm certain areas of land. There is potential to mix it up, and I've seen really good farms have rows of trees and have rows of wheat, and they go between the rows of trees and just try and put a little bit more in. When it comes from the WF, they're already saying don't want population to grow, they don't want people to have children, and it looks like they don't want you to live very long either, because the strike hasn't been against, you know, the rubbish food we've been eating, the processed food that has finally come out in the news that processed food is bad for you. Who knew? It's obvious it was bad for you. The amount of crap that's in it, we should be eating whole foods. We've moved away from that because corporations love selling us sugary cereals and all that sort of rubbish. Maybe we don't eat so many cereal crops, maybe we need to eat proper food. They're trying to switch us onto a corporate method of creating food. So they've already built these factories. There's one called Unelected that's going to turn out hundreds of tons of mealworm insects for protein every year. They've already made the factories for the bugs, and now they're putting this strain on farmers. And you know, we keep going on about, but it's because of the climate, it's because of the climate. They're still flying everywhere. They're not complaining about the flying. It's the food production. You know, they're saying they need to feed the world, and you think, oh well, yes, you need to feed the world, okay. But we don't need to do it the old way. We need to do it in a factory. Now, a corporation needs to do it, which we've already made. And now we've already made that. We've spent, probably hundreds of millions building that. We now need to do something about these bloody farmers that keep growing all this food. That's the dots I've joined. Why is that struggle happening across the world with farmers? They're reinventing the food chain. And I don't like it. I just don't like them saying they're going to reinvent the food chain. They're unelected. And worse than that, they actually boast about penetrating the cabinets.
So that we penetrate the cabinets.
So our vote, what does that mean when they've already been to the Young Global Leaders Institute that they set up?
Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
Mm-hmm. Macron's been there. He's got the bug factory in his country. So what are we voting for? We're voting for people that have already been through the process, chosen, gone to the right school. And when you join the dots, you start to think, actually, this democratic thing doesn't really work. It's not really happening for us, is it? Because they're unelected, then we elect the selected. And there's no choice between them. Different face, same programme. When people have these arguments over, I'm going to vote for Keir, I'm done with these Tories, I'm like, that will make no difference. That will make no difference whatsoever.
Davos or Westminster?
Davos.
Everyone has a different idea. Everyone puts the dots together in a different place and comes up with a different picture. When you think something and then it actually happens, that is no longer a conspiracy theory.
It penetrates the cabinets.
Davos or Westminster?
Davos.